And welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated cryptocurrency, businesses, real estate, all tax deferred, so you can create and preserve more wealth. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swartz. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, cryptocurrency, and entrepreneurial minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of Connecticut these days, but he's originally from Scotland. And he's focused on all things making the cryptocurrency trading more transformed into finance and taking the current financial system into a reality of where the cryptocurrency market is going. He as well has extensive experience, and he's the chief business officer at INX Limited. And he is here to tell us more and more about the future of trading. Please welcome to the show with me, Douglas Bortworth. Hey, Douglas, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Brett. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Sure. My background is obviously born in Scotland, Carnegie Mellon, then Yale Business School, 10 years at Morgan Stanley running foreign exchange derivative trading desks. I ran a proprietary trading desk at Merrill Lynch. Then I went to Standard Chartered, ran a Latin America trading desk. I went to TP ICAP and started up a foreign exchange ECN. That's a way to trade currencies back and forth. And then about 3 years ago, I heard of a company in Israel that had gone to the SEC and said, look, ICOs are crazy, they're illegal, but we'd like to do a registered security, a full prospectus offering on the blockchain, because we believe that all assets will move on to the blockchain in the future, because stocks should really trade 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I joined that company, INX Limited. I'm the chief business officer today there. And since we did the first ever IPO on the blockchain, a full registered security with a full prospectus. We raised around $85 million in April of this past year. Since then, we've bought a broker dealer, we've bought an ATS, an alternative trading system. We've bought a transfer agent, and we have also bought an interdealer broker. And we also now have the ability to trade cryptocurrencies for retail institutions in about 31 states in the United States. In the next few weeks, we expect to do an IPO of our equity in Canada. So we've got a lot of firsts here. We're the first ever guys to do an IPO on the blockchain. We're the first ever, I think, to do 2 IPOs for one company in 2 different countries, following different regulators. We work with the NFA, the SEC, FINRA, and every state regulator for MT licenses. Our belief is that for the next couple of years, you'll be able to use Bitcoin or Ethereum or USDC or dollars to buy and sell securities in your time zone all around the world.
Phenomenal. We're going to dive all into that, and our whole topic of today's conversation is crypto trading transform. Before we go there, Douglas, though, I want to take one other step back. I want to go maybe back to days when you're in Scotland, when you were younger, right? And maybe studying at university, or maybe just in high school days. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. Some people call them strengths, some people call them superpowers. I'm curious, what are those 1 or 2 gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Well, I don't know if I have any gifts. I think I certainly have tenacity. If I have a view, and this was sort of horned through being a trader. When you have a view, you want to get into it as much as you can, and when you believe in something strongly and you're passionate about it, I think it becomes much easier to talk about it and to spread the word. And certainly I find that for me, it's my tenacity or my excitement about something that really drives me. And if there's one thing that I'm passionate about today, it's certainly digital securities.
Fantastic. That moves us right into what our topic is, which is transforming all things with finance and cryptocurrency. And by the way, you can learn more about Douglas Bortworth by going to Twitter was one place, and DC, it's D as in David, C as in cat, and then B as in boy, ORTHWICK, DC Bortworth in Twitter.com. You can also check out their website as well, inx.co. Okay, so let's dive right into the first part of the series today, or the topic today, which is, what's the number one secret to transforming the cryptocurrency trading world? Give us you maybe touched on a little bit about, you teased it with a little bit, but what's the steps that needs to be taken, and how are you guys on the front line of that?
Today blockchain assets, or cryptocurrencies as you call them, is about $3 trillion market cap. But the market cap for equities is around 110 trillion, for fixed income around 120 trillion. So we're really at a drop in the ocean, or around 1.5% of blockchain is, assets are on the blockchain. It's our belief that they all will. Now, our secret sauce is we work with the regulators. We like the regulator in the passenger seat rather than the rear view mirror, because when you deal with financial regulators, it's not about run first, break, and then fix, which is sort of the Facebook model. Instead, it's more of a, you've got to be slow, you've got to work with them, and you've got to make sure that you set the table in the right way. And we've spent the last 3 years setting the table in the right way, working with the regulators. I think that most folks, when they learn about cryptocurrencies or they hear about it, maybe they've watched it testifying in front of the Senate. Well, the folks that are testifying are really, and when they say that the regulators haven't given them direction, it's because they never asked for direction. And so they're blaming the regulators as opposed to themselves for not going to see the regulators in the first place. I think what INEX has done is we've sat there quietly working and educating regulators on the blockchain space. And I think that's very important. Now, today we trade cryptocurrencies and people talk about Bitcoin or Ethereum, but in the future, you'll trade digital securities. And what's a digital security? Well, it's Nike, but in a digital format that you could self-custody on your own wallet, like a MetaMask wallet on your phone. We would also hold things called NFTs, and everyone knows what NFTs are right now. But in the future, there'll be NFTs of your driver's license, your vax certificate, or your passport. But you'll also hold currency in your wallet, this wallet on your phone, and that'll be USDC or G dollars or GN, whatever currency you want, or even your Bitcoin or your Ethereum. And so we're moving into this sort of new zone or new place that no one's ever really been into before. And that is where the new generation, or folks under 30 years old, they don't know much about custody. They trade on somewhere like a Robinhood right now, but they run a trade 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the current system of trading equities is anachronistic. It's very old. It's kind of based upon someone taking a horse and cart in from New Jersey, trading on the New York Stock Exchange floor, then reading the newspaper and taking the horse and cart back. But the markets are 24 hours these days. They're 7 days a week. They should be 365 days a year. Crypto's been doing that. FX has been doing at least 5 days a week throughout the year, but securities are going to move in that direction. And it's not just me saying this. Clayton, who was the SEC chair last year, around this time actually, in a speech in Philadelphia, said he can see all assets moving onto the blockchain in the next 3 to 5 years.
Incredible. And really interesting that you put it like that. You want them in the passenger seat and you want them in the rearview mirror. And exactly right. Working and educating and taking the responsibility on your company and your expertise, because guess what? The regulators, their comfort and their expertise is not what you're doing, right? And so instead of making an adversarial, or like you said, in a rearview mirror, having to chase you for these things, just go along with them. Now, you mentioned going slowly, right? That's probably hard in today's day and age, right? So talk about the habits and the procedures and the systems and processes is that you're still, growing the company, but at the same time doing it in a methodical, strategic way, that you're not going too fast. What are some of those, green lights and red lights that you're running into, and how do you see those, and how does that change the way that you're rolling everything out?
Whenever I hear red light, green light, I think about that show on Netflix. It scares me. But I'd say here's what we did. We spent 950 days working on our prospectus with the SEC, because nothing that we were using was something we could cut and paste from another prospectus, because no one had ever done an IPO in the blockchain before. So we had to come up with definitions for things that no one had ever had to define before. If you do a biotech IPO, you can copy and paste from the last biotech IPO all the risk factors, but you couldn't do that with a blockchain security. And I think that that's sort of like something that was very new to us. But you can't upset a regulator, or you can't trade something without having the approval process in place, without having all the right licenses. And that's something that we sort of made a big move towards having, because we thought that was extremely important. You can't trade Nike, for example, a security, just through your website. You actually have to be a registered broker dealer, you have to be an ATS, or you have to be an exchange. And we understand that.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? It sounds like, with your background and everything you've been through before in the Morgan Stanley world and everything else, you're able to connect these two things. And so um, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's kind of like step one, step two, working with the regulators, making sure you're doing it at the pace where they can keep up defining and creating these new things, kind of really breaking up a brand new blue ocean of IPOs for the blockchain world and cryptocurrency world. So what's the next step in this process? And where do you see it in the next 3 to 5 years? And when you say assets, are you in all assets? Kind of give us a little bit of a feel for everything that we're talking about here that you believe will be digitized in on the blockchain and with crypto.
Well, I'll give you some examples. Already you can trade currency. You can do cryptocurrencies. You can trade USDC, which is like the dollar, but a version of that. But soon you'll be able to trade equities. I think Nike at some point in the next 2 or 3 years will have a digital security that will trade not just on the New York Stock Exchange, but also on the blockchain. But it's not the only one. I think every single equity is going to trade on the blockchain, and you'll self-custody it yourself. Now, what's my timeline? Well, first I had to lay the table, and that's what we've been doing over the last 12 months, laying the table, making sure we have all the licenses in place. Then you start the marketing. And we've got apps coming out to trade cryptocurrency in probably February or March, and then we've got another app that'll trade cryptocurrency and digital securities coming out in June, July. And I think that's going to be very exciting for the market because they're going to be able to trade all of these different products backwards and forwards against each other in their time zone, as opposed to having to wait for the US's time zone.
Very, very, very interesting. And how about real estate? I'm curious. So, what's your take on being able to trade real estate assets through cryptocurrency? Any thoughts on that, or how that might change that world?
Yeah, fractional ownership of real estate is sort of where security tokens first came out, and folks are very excited about that. And you can take a $100 million office building, split it up in a fractionalized basis, and then have accredited investors own it through something like a Reg D. I think that that's going to move in. We're moving into that space as well, and a lot of people are excited about it. But you're restricting yourselves there to accredited investors or rich people. And when you trade Nike, Nike can't just be for rich people. It can't be a private security. It has to be a public security, and public securities have to be available to everybody. And I think when you're democratizing finance in the way that we are, and this is why we did a full prospectus, we want the little guy to have the ability all around the world to invest in ideas and processes that before they couldn't. Now today, really, when you buy equity, you buy equity. We didn't sell equity in our security token. We actually sold a percentage of the profits that we could make if we make them in the future to our investors. And this is something as well that there are infinite different ways that you can invest in different projects. I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a cure for COVID, but I need to raise money to get it through the FDA, and I need to raise 100 million. I could raise 100 million from private equity and VCs and give up a lot of my equity, or I could do a security token where I ask people to invest and I'll give them a percentage of the profits if we have any. Well, I think that people would invest in that because they'd say, you know what, I believe this is going to be a cure for COVID. I think there's going to be a lot of profits there, and I'll invest in that. What's nice for the founders of this company is that they don't have to give up their IP and sell it to the VCs or the private equity. They still own the IP. They're just giving up a percentage of their profits in the future.
Wow, I absolutely love that. And I think I connect. I want to make sure I got that. So instead of having to take your big, amazing, world-changing idea and give up tons of percentage of ownership to be big VCs, or let's say the richest, you're kind of democratizing the opportunity for the little guy, right, to put fractional small amounts because it's fractional ownership. Now, it's for profits, right? But it's okay because their risk is also less too. On the VC side, if they're going to be putting tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into something, they need that ownership. And in this sense, since we're lowering the risk because it's multiple investors, therefore we can do profits. We don't have to give as much ownership up. Is that a fair summary so far?
I think so. We raised money from 7,250 investors in 74 countries. The average age was 42 years old. Now, this tells us a number of things. It tells us that there's a lot of interest in this. It's not just for young folks. We had folks up to the age of 70 years old investing in our idea, our vision. And at the time when we raised the capital, we raised it from day one. We didn't raise it, a traditional IPO, when the retail is allowed to get invested, let's say Coinbase, for example. Well, retail could only buy into it when it was worth $100 billion. as a company. That's, sort of, it sounds like the retail there was used as the way for the VCs and the private equity guys to get out of their positions that they bought into much, much earlier at much lower valuations. The way that we did ours was folks were getting in on the ground floor. Now, normally the ground floor is reserved for VCs, private equity, or wealthy individuals. Our view is that in the future, everyone should be allowed to buy it. Now, you can talk about fractional ownership of real estate that traditionally is owned by family offices or pension funds or hedge funds. Or you could talk about, fractional ownership of, let's say, a Picasso painting. Everyone would love to own a little piece of a Picasso, but today, if you want to hedge yourself against inflation, well, you got to be pretty rich to go out there and buy a Picasso. But the little guy says, I'd like to be able to do that too, but I can't afford one of these masters. But if I could buy a little piece of it, then that's fine. And Bitcoin's kind of like that. Bitcoin is sort of like, it's like a real estate or gold or like a painting, in that anyone can go out there and buy a tiny little fraction of ownership and add to that ownership over time in their time. And the way I see it is, it's sort of like it's a life preserver for your wealth, for your capital. Because obviously it's limited in what it is, but also you can move it. It's portable. And, a master's painting isn't that portable. Fractional ownership of a master's painting isn't that portable, but certainly Bitcoin is.
Excellent. I want to shift a little bit. I grew up in the real estate world, very hard assets, cash flow, appreciation, got into the capital gains tax deferral world, which we'll touch on here in a minute with cryptocurrency and such. But I want you to take us to the moment, because it sounds like you're more in the traditional securities, world. Take us to the moment when you said, "Oh my gosh, cryptocurrency will change everything forever," because there's still a lot of skeptics out there. There's still a lot of people who believe it doesn't have, it doesn't have, it has too much risk, right? And it doesn't have utility, and it doesn't have certain things. I mean, part of it, they just don't understand it. But take us to the moment that it really changed it for you, and help those who are still skeptical of cryptocurrency and investing in it, so they can have some encouragement to look at the future and invest in it and take advantage of it.
Well, I'll give you a couple of steps. I spent my career at Morgan Stanley devaluing currencies, and whether that's in Latin America, in Asia, or Iceland, that was pretty much our job. And we always saw the dollar as being the cleanest of the dirty shirts. And I think that one day I came to a realization that actually the dollar was filthy. It wasn't a clean shirt at all anymore. But you didn't notice the dollar going down in value because everyone compares it to the euro or to the yen, and the yen and the euro are falling at just the same amount. But you certainly notice it with your grocery bill. Now, your grandparents always told you, look, if you buy real estate, it's a great investment. It always goes up. It's not that real estate's going up. It's the value of your dollar that's going down. We all grew up in high school and we looked at these charts that went from the bottom left to the top right, and that talked about compound interest, and how with compound interest, that dollar today is going to be worth a lot more in the future. And yet, if that's the case, then why is it that when my first job when I got out of school was $30,000 in 1992, but today that same job has to be filled at around $150,000? Is it that the people are 5 times smarter, or is it that the dollar's just gone down in value? Now, also when interest rates today are at zero, there is no compounding interest. You can forget about that. And when the US Fed is out there printing money, what is it, something like 40% of all dollars that are out there today actually were printed in the last 6 months? That begins to have some concern. And then I looked at Bitcoin and I realized that, look, here's somewhere where I can put capital, and I can, I guess, take it out of that fiat banking system where the bankers are in charge of the printing presses, and put it into something where it isn't printed, which is the same as someone thinks of as a Picasso or a very expensive penthouse in Manhattan. People buy these not because they think they're going to be great investments, but maybe because they believe that it's a great hedge for them against inflation. And if there's one thing that I'm certainly aware of, it's inflation. It's the fact that the US dollar is dropping in price relative to goods. And then, if you wonder why the stock market, the S&P was up 28% last year, I wouldn't say it was because stocks were better. I'd say it's probably because it's just moving up like inflation. Look at Argentine stocks. They always do very well, but they do well because they're priced in Argentine dollars, or the Argentine peso, sorry, which is collapsing. Or think about Turkish stocks these days. They're up through the moon. Why? Because the Turkish lira is collapsing in price. So I think that I was looking for a lifeboat for my own wealth, and that's kind of how I discovered Bitcoin.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That was amazing, and I want to pull out a couple things there, right? The value of the dollar, right? It's not so much the real estate's going higher, or even these stocks are going higher, or these companies are higher valuation. It's that the value of the dollar has been deflated. In fact, you said 40% of all the dollars that are printed have been, or they're out there, have been printed in the last 6 months, That's incredible to think about how staggering that is. And you're right. If the government can control and have no accountability and be able to just to print, right, for whatever reasons that they deem as this necessity for political things or different things, the power really goes to the government, right, and less to the people. So cryptocurrency in a way is democratizing freedom, right, and the ability to do commerce, the ability to do trades and do different things, which leads into the next step, which is taxes, right? So we focus on capital gains tax solutions here and helping people escape feeling trapped by capital gains tax on the sale of highly appreciated cryptocurrency or businesses. So I'm curious, what's been the biggest frustration that you've seen when it comes to taxes with cryptocurrency or other highly appreciated public or private stocks?
Well, first, I'd like to tell anyone that's watching that I am not licensed in any way and I'm not giving any financial or tax advice. So let's put that on the table right now. I think that one of the biggest frustrations that folks have with taxes and cryptocurrency is that, well, I think that the US government looks at a electronic wallet as a Swiss bank account. And so, they don't know who owns what, where, when, and how, and they'd like to. Swiss bank accounts are places where you could take your wealth, you could hide it there, not pay US taxes. A cryptocurrency wallet's kind of similar, like a digital wallet. You could have Bitcoin in there that you bought on some exchange outside the United States. You could be sitting there for the last 10 years. You could have hundreds of millions of dollars, and the US government knows nothing about it. And so I think that at some point, the US government will necessitate that if you want to do any onshore transactions in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, then you're going to have to register your wallets at an institution like ourselves or a Coinbase or Kraken or someone like that. So they then have access to see what's in your wallet and find out what taxes are need to be paid. I think that the biggest frustration that Washington has right now with cryptocurrency isn't that it's nefarious. It's the fact that they don't know how much people have. And if they don't know how much people have, then they can't tax them. And I think that that's going to become a very, very important process in Washington, is figuring out how can we tax people that have made a lot of money in cryptocurrency, and yet the government has no idea. Because you can't do custody at your bank. It's not like you buy Bitcoin, you keep it at Chase, and then Chase reports to the US government, this is how much you made with your Bitcoin when you bought it and you sold it. Right now, you can buy in a myriad of offshore institutions. You could be trading away, and the government in the US has no idea whatsoever. And I think that that's really where the government's looking to clamp down. If there's a frustration, it's the fact that the media, I think, reads Washington frustration as frustration with Bitcoin, when really it's frustration with the fact that they can't tax Bitcoin yet.
Yeah, very well said. And for our listeners who are listening, part of what we do here is the deferred sales trust, the deferred capital gains taxes on cryptocurrency. We just did a Bitcoin and Ethereum case of $7.5 million deal. And what's unique about it is it's an installment sale method that reports it. And that's the first thing we say to folks is, hey, we're not hiding or not going offshore. We're actually saying, hey, IRS, we're reporting. We bought Bitcoin for, in this case, she worked for Google. She bought it for about 50,000 and went to 50 million over a period of time. And we're saying, no, we indeed bought it for this, and we are transferring it and taking an installment note like an IRA or 401k and slowly paying tax. But it's reporting it, right? Now they can see it, and they have, an audit window. It's typically 3 to 4 years, depending on the state. And then you're slowly paying tax along the way. And I think that's the key here, that they don't want to feel like people are getting away with not paying taxes. And you also don't want to feel like you can't trade or transfer or do something different with the funds. And so that's where, if anyone wants to learn about that, they can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and learn more about the deferred sales trust and how we're doing that. So, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's part of everything that grows so rapidly and so fast, right? And it's making sure that you're doing it in the right way, and that we can try to make it a win-win-win for all parties. It doesn't have to be a loser for the investor or a loser for the government. If we can figure out a way to bring transparency and clear regulations, right, and bring that together, that makes sense. You got to also realize from their perspective, they're learning along the way, what I appreciate what you said in the very beginning. That's what you're trying to do. That's your whole approach, to have them in the passenger seat versus the rear view mirror. That being said, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Shoot away.
All right. Knowing what you know now, Douglas, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget and make sure to tell yourself to do?
Read more.
Which leads us to our second question. What's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
The INX Limited Prospectus that sits on the Edgar database.
Excellent. Can you find that there? Where would you find that at? Go.
On the Edgar database,
Okay.
type in SEC Edgar database, look up INX Space Limited, and you'll learn everything you want to learn about cryptocurrencies and digital securities, because we wrote this as about 360 pages, and that's what I've been reading for the last couple of years.
Excellent. I'll check that out. Next question. What are you most curious about right now?
I'm curious about a lot of things. My latest obsession has been classic cars, but if it comes down to crypto, I think that what's going to happen with Ethereum 2.0 is very exciting for me. I think that it reminds me of Malthus theory. Malthus theory was about how the world's population is growing so fast that we're going to run out of food, and I think people have been thinking that about the Ethereum blockchain. What they forgot about with Malthus theory was that technology makes it so that we can make more food. And I think that there's a lot of technology coming down the line that's going to make Ethereum 2.0 into something that's absolutely crazy and much, much cheaper than what the current Ethereum is. I'm very excited and very curious about that.
Yeah, me too. Now, what's the timing of that? Because I've heard 2022 is the year, right? Or in July, June. Like, any take on the timing of when this is going to be released?
Well, let me just call up Vitalik and I'll find out. Now, I would guess that it's probably going to be around May.
Okay, excellent. My wife and I, we have 5 kids, and we've been in real estate our whole lives, right? And we started to get into cryptocurrency here. And so for a hobby, we've set up a couple mining rigs for the kids to learn and get hands on, and we're mining Ethereum right now. Any thoughts on mining of cryptocurrency?
Well, there's going to be no more mining of Ethereum in a couple of months. So now you're going to have to start switching to something else to mine.
Right.
But look, I think the Bitcoin miners get a bad rap. I think that a lot of, and we know a lot of them. And if anything, they're using renewable power that mostly isn't being used. But they're also finding ways to efficiently use power. And if there's one thing that we need as a country, it's efficient ways of using power and finding power. And it's the Bitcoin miners that are really paying for the R&D for that for us as a country. Now, people talk about how Bitcoin uses so much energy and fuel. How much fuel does it cost to keep all the banks open, all the lights on, and all these fancy buildings, and then defend the US dollar? That's a lot of money too. But yes, Bitcoin mining costs money, but it's actually a huge R&D project for efficient energy. And I think that shouldn't be forgotten.
That's so well said. Yeah, it's a great way to think about it. You got to look at the opportunity cost, right? And you got to apply the same logic and intensity of that argument for each side of what's already happening right now. I think by default, human nature, we think that since we've already done it, perhaps we're not, impacting the environment or energy or different things. But if you apply that same logic to what you're opposed against, and you say, you think about the rockets that go to the moon, right? Part of what NASA did for us, and people would say, "Oh, what do you want all that money to go to the moon?" Well, it opened up opportunities and exploration of technology and finding new things and expanded the human capacity to do more and help more. And like you said, become more efficient. Had we not taken that step and JFK says, "Hey, we're going to do this thing," right? Who knows where we would be technology wise? And so I like the way you put that. Let's not put it in a box and give it a bad name just because you don't quite understand it quite yet. So I couldn't agree with you more. Second to last question. What's the number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
I don't know if there's a quote or a theme or a leadership. I think that it's admitting mistakes is probably key to everything. But I'd say that I'd rather always be the tortoise rather than the hare. I think that I work in the financial industry. You don't want to mess up in the financial industry. You want to take your time, and people may be frustrated by that. But in the end, that's what it takes to become a BlackRock of the world or to become PIMCO or a Goldman Sachs. You got to take your time. You can't do it overnight.
Very well said. Great wisdom. Last question. After all your success in transforming and being on the forefront of transforming cryptocurrency to finance and everything else that you've done in your life, how do you stay centered? What's the habits you use to stay centered in your values and stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new heights?
Well, fortunately, I've got children that couldn't care less about what I do as a job, and they put me in my place every single day.
Great question. Great answer. Likewise, same thing here. So, hey, Douglas, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts that you've been given and or that you've developed, tenacity and rock solid belief, and in particular applying that to the cryptocurrency world and transforming finance. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you and the company as well?
Please go to inx.co, look up our company, or you can go to @DC Borthwick on Twitter or @INX Limited on Twitter. But thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Douglas, for being on the show. Hey, I want to also thank all of our listeners for listening to an episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust, and or connecting and working with groups like a Douglas Borkwitz's group to invest in cryptocurrency, and develop technologies to advance the future of finance is the best way for you to grow your wealth. And if we can help you with any tax deferral strategy, any tax deferral challenge you have right now, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn more. We also have a mastermind. It's a cryptocurrency DST mastermind. It happens every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern, where we have CPAs, tax professionals, financial advisors, cryptocurrency experts, and clients of ours, all of us discussing the deferred sales trust, on how to defer capital gains taxes. You're free to join. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com for more for that. Hey, thanks so much for listening. We look forward to connecting with you real soon. Please rate, review, subscribe.